Hello, everybody, and welcome to the general lesson plan about the climate crisis for U.S. Youth Climate Strike's Climate Academy. So, we are a group of hundreds of teens from all around the nation. All of us are dedicated to the climate and to helping each other, helping the future and the world. We hold many different positions and have different teams. The U.S. Youth Climate Strike is dedicated to spreading awareness, striking, and fighting for our planet while promoting intersectionality and putting those most affected on the front lines. We do so much that we have divided into several categories, the first being our best known, strikes. We have many strikes all over the nation, from California to New York. Our strikes usually have a march or sit-in/die-in, along with speakers and a lot of chanting. We also do direct action, for example, creating petitions and delivering them to politicians, testifying in front of different courts and politicians, and lobbying our government to do what is necessary. Our goal is not just to strike, but to take direct action and influence the future in a positive green way. We try to do this within our group, but also spreading the message beyond. Another thing that we are doing, which is actually what this lesson is a part of, is education. We want to educate people on what the climate crisis is, how it's caused, and who it affects, so people can be the best activists they can be, which is why Climate Academy was created. We are now going to do an agree or disagree activity. Several statements are going to be read, and you are going to decide whether you agree with them or disagree with them, and why you do so, and why someone on the opposite side might agree or disagree. Climate change is real. Climate change is one of the world's biggest issues. Politicians need to be doing more to address climate change. Climate change is affecting us right now. Marginalized groups are more affected by climate change. We will now talk about the causes of the climate crisis and climate change. One of the causes of the climate crisis is the increase in greenhouse gases. The greenhouse effect happens when sunlight comes down to the Earth. Some of the energy is reflected back into space. Some is absorbed and re-radiated as heat. Most of the heat is absorbed by greenhouse gases and then reflected in all directions, warming the Earth. Because of humans, greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide have been pumped into the atmosphere in huge amounts, making the Earth hotter and hotter. These are some of the main gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. Both methane and CO2 are released into the atmosphere naturally, but human action contributes significantly more. A large amount of methane is released from landfills. According to NASA, humans have increased atmospheric CO2 concentration by more than a third since the Industrial Revolution began. Nitrous oxide is, like CO2, produced from fossil fuels. It is also created from fertilizers. Chlorofluorocarbons wear away the ozone layer. It is important to emphasize that the climate crisis is caused by human action. According to the Carbon Majors Report, 100 companies produced 70% of the worldwide greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. Despite growing concerns for the effect on climate, we've actually been increasing our emissions over the years. The effects of climate change can't be fully predicted, though there are some things that are certain to happen or are already playing out. The average warming of the Earth will trigger many other serious consequences. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, predicts a temperature rise of 2.5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit over the next century. Due to melting glaciers and warmer water temperatures, the sea level will be continuously rising. Projections forecast the sea level rising an additional 1 to 4 feet by 2100. Tropical storms, such as hurricanes, are expected to grow in intensity, and overall precipitation levels will increase, though some regions will become drier. In fact, droughts and heat waves were also projected to become more severe. These effects will have a significant impact on the function of infrastructure, health, agriculture, forestry, transportation, air, and water quality, according to NASA. While it's true that the climate crisis will impact everyone on the planet, some people will be hit much harder and sooner than most. Many communities will be disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis, including people of color, indigenous people, people with disabilities, women, working class, immigrants and refugees, LGBTQ people, and certain geographical locations. To focus on a few, people of color are disproportionately affected in the climate crisis. Communities are more likely to have toxic facilities near them, receive inadequate disaster protection, and get late responses to emergencies. They have less protection than white communities and uneven resource allocation. They may not have access to medical services, and their geographical location are usually have higher likelihoods of flood and diseases. Statistically, they are more likely to be exposed to polluted air or live near coal plants and toxic sites. Communities of color breathe in 40% more polluted air than white communities across the U.S. And though African Americans make up 13% of the U.S. population, a startling 68% live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant compared to 56% of whites. This zone is where residents breathe the most resultant pollutants, which can cause a range of health problems, from heart attacks to birth defects to asthma, states the NAACP. Although Latinos make up 17% of the U.S. population, 39% live within a 30-mile radius from a coal plant. This is not okay. In addition to the obstacles previously discussed, Indigenous communities will also face other unique challenges when it comes to the climate crisis. It is important to remember that the same obstacles shouldn't be generalized to all Indigenous communities, although we can identify some common trends. The climate crisis will exacerbate other economic and social inequalities and inequities. With food, declining harvests, foods having from a toxic source, and rising temperatures equals less food storage for Alaska natives. Polluted air from dust and changing weather patterns and wildfires can impact Indigenous communities more. And with Alaska, threat to infrastructure due to ice thaws, damaged roads, and rising sea levels means flood risks, along with many proposed pipelines that run through Indigenous land, for example, Line 3, which pose risks to Indigenous communities and infringe on their sovereignty. Dependence on the environment means these effects will be felt more acutely due to existing inequities. This is not okay. Another community that will be disproportionately affected are people with disabilities. The main cause of this is the natural disasters that aren't so natural because they're increased in amount and severity by the climate crisis. These disasters kill and harm people, and people with disabilities are killed and hurt at higher rates. Access to medication can be affected in these disasters, and people may not have access to their life-saving medication. And in general, with the climate crisis, extreme weather, especially heat, can harm those who can't regulate body temperature. This is not okay. Please remember that this is just a brief overview of only some communities. You can do more research on your own, and Climate Academy will be having more videos that go in depth about each community and how they're affected by the climate crisis. So what can you do? First, it's important that youth are involved. Youth are the future. The climate crisis is going to affect us in the long run, and it's important that we know about it and do something about it. Our voices can be the most powerful, and it's important that people listen to them. Although we are just kids and have a million other things going on, all of us here are passionate about this issue and want to help. It's important that we do because we can help ourselves and so many other people. Through this movement, we learn about public speaking, lobbying, policy, teaching, talking to others, and so much more. But most importantly, we learn to stand up for what we believe in. One of the things you can do is you can share and attend. You can share our events on social media. Follow our social medias, for example, US Youth Climate Strike, and then whatever state account you are in. Coming to our events and advocating for the issues that are important to you, and then following climate activism accounts on Instagram to get involved and stay educated. We want as many people as we can involved and lifting up the voices of youth. That's why we appreciate it so much that you are listening to this video right now. If you're interested in organizing with us, go to our social medias and you can find applications. Being an activist looks different from everyone. For some people, surviving in this society that is made to oppress them is a form of activism. One of the ways to create change is by supporting politicians who are fighting for communities and not corporations and the elite. You can help these leaders and elect them into office. Another way to help is to get involved in local politics, speak at city council hearings, organize your community to propose new legislation. Lastly, you can support your community by hosting meetings, events, mutual aid funds, finding out what the needs and wants of your community are and how you can go about fighting for that. Individual action is amazing, and we encourage you to do it. For example, eating less and eating local, using less plastic, using renewables and reuse, buy used clothes, and so much more, but is not enough. Many people may not be able to take these actions due to financial or health reasons, and the climate crisis will not stop if we all buy used clothes. It will help significantly, but it will not stop it. In order to stop it, and in order to protect those communities most on the front lines, the system as a whole needs to change, and that is what we are fighting for. So what can the government/the world do? One of the biggest things is policy. Having a just transition to green energy, for example, the Green New Deal. If we don't stop or significantly limit greenhouse gas emissions by 2020, we will not be able to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The government needs to play a key role in this transition if we are to achieve it anywhere nearby the preferred date. While the broad goal will include a transition to 100% green energy, there are many steps that should be preferably to be taking place now. For example, stopping construction of fossil fuel infrastructure, de-insensitize carbon and desensitize renewables, and insensitize renewables, divestment from fossil fuels and reinvestment in a green economy, end systematic oppression that is causing environmental injustice, clean air and water and food are human rights, and overhaul of the transportation system and increasing energy efficiency, along with educating the public about what is happening. Thank you for watching this video and taking part in educating yourself about the climate crisis. We hope that you have learned something, and if you have any questions, feel free to email us. Thank you.